Well, it's another year, and another year that Iowa cannot compete with Penn State on the wrestling mat. Domination from the Nittany Lions. We break it down today. Locked on Hawkeyes.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube. While you're there, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Just takes a moment and helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and make sure you use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Well, a look back here on a Friday night at what we saw as Iowa goes into the Hornets' nest and walks away a 30-8 loser against Penn State. Now, as we talked about earlier this week, I don't think this should come as a surprise. The gap between Penn State and Iowa is immense. The gap between Penn State and everybody is immense. And we're at a point now where I think the question becomes, if you put Penn State up against everybody in the country in a duel, who'd win? If you put Penn State up against whoever you wanted in a national style tournament, who would win? That's what we're looking at right now. And that's how ridiculous this is. But we knew coming into the season that Penn State was going to be one of the best teams in the country, as they have been year in and year out for the past 12 years. However, Iowa went out and spent. Iowa invested on NIL funds. Iowa went into the transfer portal, and they were aggressive. And because of that, there was, I would say, a hope from people that maybe they weren't good enough to beat Penn State in a duel, but maybe come March with a couple of breaks, you could hang around. Maybe something crazy happens. I think we learned tonight that's silly. I mean, it's just talk about threading the needle or finding a needle in the haystack or whatever cliche you want to use. This is not going to work. So we look at it a multitude of different ways. And at the top, as a Hawkeye wrestling fan, you're ticked off, right? If you're somebody that watched this program be built up in the 70s, the behemoth it was in the 80s and 90s, and into the 2000s, and you see what's happening, you say, well, this can't happen. This is Iowa. We can't allow this to happen. We need new blood. We need to go a different direction. It's the coaching. Before it gets into the coaching, though, there's one thing that Penn State completely changed. They went out and showed the ability to get the top level guys year in, year out recruiting. The guys that were ready-made national champions, and then take the other guys and build them into national champions. And they kind of flipped it. And instead of the beginning of the Cale Sanderson regime, what he was looking at is getting those elite level athletes, those guys that were going to score a ton of points at nationals, and that's how they were going to do it, and then it just kept building on itself in the behemoth that it is today. That was a different way than what Iowa was doing and trying to build up a lineup 1 through 10 that was going to be able to compete. You're going to have All-Americans at every weight and then a national champion or two, and that's how you built a team. And that's how you built a team to win duels and ultimately win national championships. It worked incredibly well for a long time. Penn State changed the equation. Penn State's also changed the equation as it pertains to financial investments, the way they do things with the wrestling club, and a whole bunch of other things. But Iowa invested this year. Iowa went out and they brought in dudes. And they brought in Kyle Parko. And they brought in Ja'Cory Teamer. And you're looking at this and saying, oh, maybe. But the gap, it's significant. Now, why would you do that in a year? I got this question quite a bit this week. Why would you go out and why would you spend? And we talked about this a little bit in our crossover because we knew that Penn State was going to be a monster again this year. I mean, you looked at this lineup, it was stacked. It's always stacked, but it was even more stacked than normal this season. Why would you go out and do it? And I think more than anything, it's just sending a message for that next tier of athlete, that guy that's looking for a payday, that guy that's looking for a national championship at the end of his career. Iowa's going to be the place for you. Penn State, the way that they built it, Iowa can't replicate it. They can't. It sucks, but it's the reality. Iowa can't replicate what they are. With the population base, with the wrestlers and location being a huge factor, you can't compete with Penn State. Where are the best wrestlers coming from? It's not the state of Iowa anymore. Not the Midwest as we think of the Midwest anymore. It's the out East. And that's where a majority of these guys are coming from. And Iowa can't compete with that. Because you're not moving Iowa City to Pennsylvania. You're not going to do that, right? So that's where you can't compete. And you can't build a program like Penn State has built theirs. That is the reality. So let's start with the recruiting before you even get in there. And then you look at the aggressiveness of Penn State. And you look at just that determination, the physicality, the athleticism, which is, I think, another big factor of this. When you look at these wrestlers and you look at just the physical specimens that they are, but the athleticism that they are, you don't see a lineup full of grinders. The Tommy Tough guys that are just that. Now, they're all tough. But the grinder type of wrestler, that's not what these guys are. Up and down this lineup, you look at the athleticism that they have. Another way that Iowa can't compete. I think you're going to see Teamer later on. He's going to get his legs back. Remember, he's coming off a pretty significant hamstring injury after the Iowa State duel. He had just got one mat time last week against Ohio State. That was the only time out there. It wasn't fun to see losing to Kasich, but going to be fine there. There were high water marks of the match. Seeing Drake Ayala do what he did, that was great to see. The questions earlier this week, was he going to be able to go? He went out there. Obviously, what we saw out of Buchanan at 97, that was a nice win. I thought you saw some good things. Ferrari. There was a stall, went against him, didn't love it, but he went out there and competed. That was good to see. But overall, Caliendo, I don't know what's happening with him in Messenbrink, but it's not good. Parco ran out of gas. Weird things can happen from time to time, and Van Ness just has his number. That's what we're going through, though. You just look through these matches, and it's not even, man, if you would have got this here, you can't even go down that path. It's frustrating. But for the wrestling fans out there that want to change, they want to move on from the Brands regime, they want to find something different. My question to you is who? Who do you believe that could take the program maybe a step further or generate more excitement? Be you, young, new, innovative. Because there are those people out there. But ultimately, at least for me, who can beat Penn State? Who can beat Cale Sanderson? I don't think that guy's out there. I don't think that guy's there. From Brett Metcalf to Spencer Lee to whatever, David Taylor, ton of names that are out there. I don't see those guys that are going to be able to take down Cale. And maybe it's a loser mentality. And I can completely understand it if that's your thought process. We got to try something because what we're doing right now isn't working. I agree, it's not. I personally don't believe that person in the current structure of collegiate wrestling is out there. I don't believe that guy exists. However, if you got an idea, hit us up. Let us know on social media at Locked On Iowa, or you can hit us up right here if you're watching on YouTube on the comments section. Give us some names, give us some thoughts, and some reasoning behind those names of why they can do it. Because Penn State, they are a monster once again. I mean, just think about a number 1 versus number 2 basketball game. If it was number 1 versus number 2 in hoops coming up this weekend, you imagine a team being, well, here was a 20-point favorite. It'd be like 30 points in college basketball or 35 points in college football. That's the gap that they've created. Just incredible. Let's get into a little basketball talk. We're going to talk about Caitlin Clark, her ceremony coming up at Carver Hawkeye Arena coming up this weekend. Tom Kakert from HawkeyeReport.com. He's going to join us as we roll through. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is brought to you by Game Time. Look, attending an NFL playoff game, it's an experience unlike any other. The energy, the excitement, the connection with other fans, it's completely unmatched. I remember the thrill of seeing my Bears clinch a playoff win live. It's a memory that I'll never forget. This year, Game Time makes it even easier to create those unforgettable moments with their new feature. It's Game Time Picks. Filters out the fluff to show you only the best deals on great seats so you can focus on what matters, being there. I used Game Time Picks to get tickets for a big matchup at Carver Hawkeye Arena earlier this year. It could have been easier. I found a super deal that gave me incredible value for amazing seats, and I could even preview the view of my spot before buying the tickets. The all-in pricing is also a game changer. I absolutely love this. It gives you the ability to get your tickets without surprise fees at checkout. Plus, knowing my tickets are backed by the Game Time guarantee gave me complete peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
Kakert, HawkeyeReport.com. He joins us. Hello, Tom Kakert. How are you?
I'm doing terrific. How are you guys?
Doing well. Doing really well, actually. A lot of ground to cover with you, Tom. I guess let's get to the announcement that came yesterday that the Brazilian national team and the Indiana Fever are going to play an exhibition game at Carver Hawkeye Arena the first Sunday in May, which I think is the 4th. Was it the 4th? I believe it's the 4th. No details yet as to when the tickets will be available, but apparently it is the university that is in charge of the ticket sales. Tom, is that what you've heard?
That's what I understand. I'm going to try and get some clarification this weekend when we're there at Carver Hawkeye, but that's the understanding I have. And I'm going to put the over-under on tickets being sold out at 20 minutes.
It won't take long. Yeah. No, it won't take long. I might take the under.
Yeah,
I know. I might too.
Yeah.
it just matters if the technology is going to be able to keep up with it. Well, let's go to Sunday first and talk about what it's going to be. Obviously, a win for the team would be incredible. It would certainly change the perspective of what they are and beat a tournament team at minimum. But that aside, it's about what's going to happen after the game. What do you anticipate what the environment's going to be like? And now with the distance after last season, just what we've seen from Caitlin Clark and pushing all the right buttons, what do you anticipate Sunday's going to be like?
Boy, it's sort of, I've kind of joked, half joking, that the third thing on the list for Sunday is the actual game. That's Caitlin being back, retirement of her number, one of the greatest, obviously the greatest player in Iowa women's basketball history, and maybe the history of Iowa basketball. I think that's probably fair to say as well, men or women. And maybe the best player in the history of women's college basketball ever. That's a debate to be had, but I would put her in that conversation and probably at the top of my list. It's going to be electric, though. It's going to just, look at the secondary market on tickets. It's crazy. I mean, she just, I've always jokingly called her box office.
You're right.
That's what she is. She is box office. You could sell tickets for her doing just about anything. Just because, especially with the basketball in her hand, it's just people want to see it. And the three of us have seen a lot of things over the years, and it's like Tiger Woods playing golf. You just go see him. Oh, it's Tiger Woods. I'm going to go watch. It's Caitlin Clark. I'm going to go watch that game. So it's going to be awesome, and hopefully a good environment for those recruits, because that would be a big bonus if they can get some of those really talented players.
Yeah, and it's a pretty good list, right, of prospective Hawkeyes coming in. Tom, I mean, these are some of the who's who of the classes to come, correct?
Yeah, Addison Deal is coming in, and she's already committed, and Journey Houston. but it's 2026 players. Kate Harpring, you guys remember Matt Harpring? Her dad played at Georgia Tech.
Yep.
Really good wing player, and she has probably risen to be the number 1 or number 2 player in that entire class, and she's a 5'10" guard. So that will be a huge visitor. Addison Bjorn, who's a 6'2" wing from the Kansas City area. She's going to be in. She's another 5-star prospect. Jenica Lewis, who's from Johnston. You guys are, I'm sure, familiar with her.
A lot of her names.
Just a super talented player. I mean, I think she's been talked about as a recruit, Trent, probably since she was like in 8th grade or so.
Yeah, because her older brother is like
circulating
5 years older than her, something like that. And everybody just said, well, like when she was in 7th grade, look out. Think he's a good player. Yeah. Sister might be better already. I mean, that's what Jenica, kind of the talk about her. And she was the number 1 player in the country as a freshman. And she's been great there. That Johnson program is really good. But this is going to be a fun weekend, Tom. And do you give them any shot at all, though, of pulling the upset on the hardwood when we actually get to the game? The real reason that people are there, I guess. Can they pull this shocker?
There's always a chance. I mean, the emotions of the day, and you just kind of, and USC has trouble shooting or something, and there's always a chance. But boy, and I would have really felt better about Iowa's chances had they come out and played well in back-to-back games, but they just didn't play really well the other night. They just didn't. It just really struggled to put away a Northwestern team that came in 0-7 in conference play, and they could never put them away. And it felt like a step back after kind of a step forward at Washington, and that's what kind of gives you pause to think, boy, they're playing better and they figured something out. I think they have figured a little bit out with Jan kind of committing to playing Hannah at the 5 more, because I just think that's what you got to do to be successful with this team. But I still think their Achilles heel is their turnovers and outside shooting. They just don't have those. They're sloppy with the ball at times, and they just are really inconsistent shooting the ball from the outside.
10 games left on the men's schedule. We won't see them until Tuesday. It's been a long break. Boy, it sure feels like I'm not sure winning 7 out of 10 is going to be enough. Now, I know that the water gets deep and there'd be some good wins in there if they were able to get that, one would assume. But, boy, Tom, you just wonder about this program. You really do. And I know we sound like broken records. They've lost 4 out of their last 5. I hate to say it feels like the end.
It's fair to feel like that. Just because they have not played well. They particularly have been really, really bad on the road. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. Other than the Michigan game, they haven't.
Yeah, that was what, a 2-point game? 2-point game?
That was a 2-point game with a chance to win at the end. And it's wild because Michigan's one of the better teams in the league. But
you went to that game, didn't you?
I did. I was there. I was there. It was a good game. It was fun, and they started poorly in that game. It was kind of that second group of Price Sanford and Drew Thelwell, who wasn't starting at that time. And they came in and just kind of kept them afloat, and they played really well that game. But boy, since then on the road, it's just been double-digit loss after double-digit loss, and a lot of points given up, and that continued at Ohio State on Monday, and thankfully they're at home, but it's against Purdue and Wisconsin, 2 teams that just don't beat themselves. And it's just, I'm concerned this stretch is gonna. You look at Ken Palm's projections, and I know it's just we look at them as I look at them from the lens of, is Iowa going to be favored in these games, which is kind of how you just look at it. I mean, Ken Palm thinks that they might win 3 more games, but point spread wise, he's got them going 1-10 or 1-9.
Washington being the game they'd be favored in?
Washington being the only game that they're favored in. And if that happens, then they're not in the Big Ten tournament. And that might, that might be problematic for Fran.
Didn't Barta fire Licklider at the end of the Big Ten tournament?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
Yes.
After 3 years.
After
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a weird, that was such a weird day.
Yeah.
That was such a weird day. 'Cause I remember sitting there and Ben Brust was there, who was committed to Iowa at the time, and talking to him and talking to his AAU coach, and everybody just kind of wondered what was going to happen to the program. And there was talk that, Matt Gatens might transfer, and it was a really weird, eerie day at the Big Ten tournament. But yeah, Gary let him go. I think it was Monday. I remember Scott Docterman. Scott you guys should have Doc on to talk about that day, because he was camped out at the Iowa Athletics Department office, at the basketball office. And
was he?
When Doc got let go, yes.
Wow. Well, we have him on Monday,
Yep.
so we'll certainly clip and save that one until then.
We're going to circle back on
ask him about that day. That's a good Scott story.
Yeah.
He loves telling that one.
Good.
That is a good one. So obviously we go through and we look at it. People talk about the financials, what it's going to take if they're going to buy him out, bring in a new staff, and it's going to cost money. You got that component to it. The Iowa job, talking to people in the national landscape when the Iowa job opened back in 2009, it wasn't looked at very well. The program, where it's at right now in the Big Ten with the revenue coming in, but new landscape of things, how is the Iowa job looked at on a national scale? Where do they kind of fit in the pecking order of college football, basketball programs?
Great question. And I think it probably is elevated just based on the fact that the Big Ten and the SEC have elevated themselves above everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
There'll still be some blue blood kind of feel to things where Kansas and North Carolina and Duke might be in quote unquote lesser conferences. UConn, lesser conference, so to speak. But I think it helps Iowa that they're in a marquee conference that has the revenue streams that they do. Now, one of the things that hurts them, though, sometimes in competing with a lot of those Big East schools in particular, those are like, Creighton is basketball only.
Mm-hmm.
Georgetown and Providence and St. John's and all those schools where they can focus their NIL towards just basketball. And I think that does help some of them, those schools, evening things out. But for the most part, I think it puts Iowa in a little higher position than maybe they would have been 4 or 5 years ago, just from a revenue perspective.
Back to Monday in the Ohio State game. Is Josh Dix injured, Tom?
Yeah.
I mean, there's times I thought he was the best player on the team.
Yeah.
But he is it significant? Like missed some time type of injury, do you know?
He is, I don't know that he is one of the toughest kids you'll ever be around. He just,
to get back as quick as he did when he snapped his leg. Yeah,
he went through one of the most gruesome injuries that you can have as an athlete, and he was back well before he probably should have been back, and that's just how he's built. So, he literally is going to be out there no matter what. He's just built that way. But yeah, he is banged up. And Peyton Sanford, I've talked about him, his shoulders messed up. He's had a couple of other nagging things that have been going on, and, Owen Freeman's banged up. He's had an ankle, he's got a finger issue. He's dinged up too. So they've got all these teams have injuries, but it's particularly hit Iowa pretty hard with their 3 best players are really hindered right now on the court.
And I think I feel worse for out of the whole group. Drew Thelwell comes in for his final year of eligibility. He has been a breath of fresh air, a guy that plays both ends of the floor, and looked like he's going to go through this in his final go around. Disappointed because that kid, boy, he has been fun to watch this season, Tom.
He has. And it's wild because you talk to some of the coaches and some of his teammates during the summer, and they thought he was not going to be anything because he had struggled to make kind of the transition. He had, they play like a snail at Moorhead, and it's just running sets and grinding clock, and it's the antithesis of Fran McCaffrey, kind of freewheeling offensive basketball, and he just had a tough time kind of figuring it out. But then I think he's one of those guys you would call a gamer, where he wasn't great, and then when they turn the lights on, he's great. And he's been great for him.
I know that we don't like to speculate. Well, Trent, I kind of do, but we won't ask you to. But if there is a coaching change, obviously the question that's going to go hand in hand with it is, what's this roster going to look like? I'm guessing that your message boards are starting to pick up on that topic.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's just the nature of. I mean, that's not even without speculation, but it's just if there is a change with any coaching staff and the way that college athletics is today, you're going to see guys leave.
Sure.
And you're going to see coaches bring their own guys in. And that's just how this goes these days. It's the nature of college athletics. It's not like, oh, well, I'm speculating that Fran's going to get fired and all these guys are going to leave. That's just how it goes. And it goes even without a coaching change. There's going to be guys that come and go. It's just how the sport is the transient nature to college athletics today in its current format. And that's not going to be altered by anything. It's going to continue. So, I don't know who would leave. It's hard to say, it just would depend, but, and we'll see what, Beth Getz is on the record, though. She was on with Chad Lystico and said she, evaluates at the end of the year. So much like Gary Barta did. So anybody who thinks, well, maybe she'll pull the plug early or she'll do this or that, she's not going to wait, and she's going to wait until after the dust is settled, and then make a decision. I know somebody will say, but she didn't do that with Brian Ferentz, and I said, well, he's not a head coach either. That's not program changing.
And that was a lot different circumstances. And he also had the president's office involved. It was not just a decision. Barbara Wilson, she going to get involved with this too?
I'm sure Barbara Wilson is hearing from people. I am 100% sure that Beth uses, as Gary Barta used to call it, his council of advisors.
For Trent, I know he wants to get wrestling in here. With this, could DeVries leave that? I mean, we could.
Oh yeah. I think he's it would be a tough thing for him to turn down, even though he's been in Morgantown for a year. It would be really tough for him to turn down because that's home.
Yeah.
The DeVries family has links to Iowa.
Sure.
I mean, they just do. University of Iowa. Yeah. And, even though Darren played at UNI, his family has deep roots with the University of Iowa. It's close to home. And it makes it an easier decision. It's like if you were to get a call and it would be like, oh, do you want to be the Minnesota coach?
Right.
Well, that's a different conversation for him. And then you might question like, well, boy, you're bailing on him after a year. This would be kind of a home call if that happens. We don't know what Beth is going to do with Fran McCaffrey, and don't know how that's going to work itself out. It'll that's her decision that she's going to have to make. But I would, if I were in that seat, I would say Beth should probably call Darren DeVries. I think his body of work at Drake and at West Virginia this year shows that he could be a very good Big Ten coach.
And West Virginia knows a little something about this because Bob Huggins, after 1 year at K-State,
great point,
went back home.
Great point.
To West Virginia after 1 year at K-State.
It's a good call, Trent.
Yep.
Number one versus
Back with you one final time, Locked On Hawkeyes. Thanks for being with us and talk the world of Hawkeyes with you each and every day. So a disappointing effort on the mat tonight. Good to catch up there with Tom Kakert from Hawkeye Report. Always a big thank you to him for joining us and talking everything going on in the world of Hawkeyes. Before we wrap up, we talked a little bit with Tom about what Sunday's going to be and the special nature of it. So excited to see Caitlin Clark, the retirement ceremony of her number. It's going to happen after the game. If you missed it, Fox, where the game is, yes, going to be broadcast on Big Fox. They will stay after the game, and they will have the retirement ceremony that will be there. I'm sure it's going to do a huge number. But one thing that's crazy we haven't talked much about is the actual matchup on the hardwood and this USC team. It was off to a 19-1 start. They're incredibly good. And it's not just Juju Watkins. This is a team. From Kiki Erfin, who inside is dynamic. The size that they play with. They're a rugged defensive team, a good rebounding team as you're going to find. This is a bad matchup for Iowa. This is one where you just kind of look at it and you're trying to find a path, right? You're trying to find a way. And yeah, you can knock down a bunch of 3-pointers and maybe get them tight and those kind of things. But when you're just looking at it kind of matchup wise and trying to find those different holes in USC, there aren't a whole lot there. Could Iowa win? Could. It's projected right now. Bart Torvik, who has now analytics on the women's side of things, has USC favored by about 11.5 in Carver Hawkeye Arena. Let's hope it's a good game. Give some positive thoughts. If Iowa can hang around here, goofy things can happen, right? But that's what we're hoping for here. A win would change the course of this Iowa women's basketball season, but it's going to be about 22 on Sunday, and should be really, really fun. We'll be with you after that one with a Rapid Reaction podcast, and not just talking about the game, but obviously all the pomp and circumstance surrounding that. The men are off until Tuesday, so it's a different kind of weekend here. Iowa Falls on Friday night in wrestling. They'll be back on the mat against Maryland. We'll keep an eye on that one as well as we talk all things Hawkeyes. Thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Go Hawks.